So here we see the situation in Red Typhoon at the beginning of the game. Let's take a look at the situation along the front. There's two gaps in the line, one by the Soviet forces and another one by the Germans. And these two gaps are important in the way that the game develops at the beginning. Germans have the 2nd Panzer Armee there. But between the 2nd Panzer Armee units and those of the German 4th Army, there's a huge gap. A gap that covers about 8 or 9 hexes. We have here the city of Kaluga. And the Germans don't have a substantial number of forces in the vicinity to plug that gap. And unfortunately for them, the Soviets have the WL front, these units with the yellow band, and they are in numbers there. So you're going to see at the beginning of the game those Soviet forces rushing through the gap. And that's where the headaches for the Germans will begin. As moving up north, we see that the Germans have strong forces concentrated in the front. And when we reach the area which is protected by the 9th Army, we see that the Soviets have a gap there. The gap is about 5 hexes wide between the units of the North Front, the ones with the green band, and the units of the Kalinin Front, the ones with the brown band. So that means the Soviets will have to probably divert some units to fill that gap while they advance on other sectors of the front. So we start the game, turn 1, and the Soviets go first, and the first phase is the activation points phase. And the Soviets receive for this turn 7 activation points, which are added to the 3 activation points with which they begin the game. Now they have a total of 10 activation points, and in this game they may use of all the activation points they want in a turn. They can only save up to 5 activation points for the next turns. Now we proceed to the movement phase, and the Soviets will use an activation point to activate the units of the WL front for movement. Here we see the positions of the units of the WL front. They have the yellow band, and they have a cavalry unit which is a breakthrough unit. It could advance 2 hexes in a combat situation, and this is before movement. And here we see the positions of the WL front after movement. They have slipped through this huge gap here, and we have these 2 units, a cavalry unit and an infantry unit, moving towards the vicinity of Sukinichi, where the Germans have a division, but there's still a wide gap, and the Germans don't have many forces there to plug the gap. So this is going to be a challenge. And focusing our attention here to these Soviet units, these 4 Soviet units are in contact with 3 German infantry divisions. They have enough for a 2-to-1 attack, but remember, this is the movement phase. They cannot attack yet. During the combat phase, the front could be activated for combat, and then that attack would be resolved. Next, the Soviets use another activation point to activate the Kalinin front for movement. Here we see the sector covered by the Kalinin front. It's the Soviet units with the brown band. And these are the units that will be trying to plug that hole. Remember that those 2 Soviet supply sources are sources of an automatic victory if the German capture those 2 and the others. And the movement was to seal the gap, and now they're in proximity to German infantry divisions of the 9th Army. Next, the Soviets use a 3rd activation to activate the units of the blue WR front for movement. So we can see most of the units of the WR front are already in contact with German units, including the powerful 1st Shock Army. But to the south of their assigned sector, there's a substantial number of Soviet units that are not in contact with any German units. Now they are, and we can expect later on, attacks by these 3 Soviet stacks against the 3 Panzer Grenadier divisions close to Mosaisk. And that's the end of the Soviet movement phase. And now we move on to the combat phase, and we will continue activating formations, but this time to conduct attacks. So the Soviets used their 4th activation to activate the WL front, this time for attack. Units of the WL front have broken through a huge gap near Kaluga, and they have units in contact with 3 German divisions of the 4th Army. Soviets have 24 combat factors, the Germans 12, so that is a 2-to-1 attack. The Germans are in woods terrain, so we use the 2-to-1 column. The Soviets are attacking during the first turn. There's a special first turn surprise rule, which means that in Soviet attacks during the first turn they get a +2 die roll modifier, so it's a +2 -1 because the defenders are in woods for a net total die roll modifier of +1. The roll is a 1 modified to a 2, and the result is AL asterisk, meaning the Soviets lose 1 unit. So the Soviets have to select a unit to eliminate. They will eliminate the lowest strength unit, the 4-5. And that is the end of that combat resolution. Next, the Soviets spend a 5th activation point to activate the WR front for attack. In this game, attacks don't have to be all pre-designated. You may observe the result of one attack before announcing another. And we see various possible attacking situations here. Here, the units of the WR front, if they combine with these units of the Kalinin front, we would have to activate the Kalinin front for attack also, would only achieve a 1-to-1 attack against these German Panzer Grenadier units, so that doesn't seem a very plausible attack situation. But we see possible attacks here against these German infantry divisions, as well as these in this location. And finally, to the south, 3 German Panzer Grenadier divisions near Mosaisk. This is a 3-to-1 attack with no die roll modifier on account of terrain for the defenders. There's a +2 for Soviet surprise. The result is a 5 modified to a 7. The highest result is a 6. That's defender retreats 3 hexes. So the defending units are retreated by the attacker, and they are flipped to their disrupted sides. Now the attackers can advance. The attackers occupied the vacated hex. Note that this unit, which is a breakthrough unit, could not advance if it occupied the vacated hex, an additional hex, because of the zone of control of these 2 German units. There's a possible attack by these 3 stacks of Soviet units against the 3-4-5 German infantry units, but it would be 1-to-1, and the Soviets will decline attacking. The next attack will be against the 3 German infantry divisions in front of the Soviet First Shock Army. It's 28-9 or 3-to-1. The result is a DR3. So the German units are retreated 3 hexes and disrupted, and the Soviets advance into the vacated hex with the First Shock Army. And those are the attacks with WR front. Soviets use their 6th activation point to activate the North front for attack. You see here 4 Soviet units attacking across a river and into Woods hex. This German division, 17-4, that's 4-to-1. The die roll modifier will be +0 because the +2 for surprise is lost with the -1 for the river and the -1 for the forest or woods terrain of the defender. The result is that the defenders have to retreat 1 hex. Soviets occupy the vacated hex and cannot advance any further, even though they have a breakthrough unit. We finished the Soviet combat phase. Now we go to the First Shock Army withdrawal phase, but we will not withdraw that unit. There's no airborne phase, nor any partisan phase in turn 1. Onto the recovery phase, but there are no disrupted Russian units to recover from disruption. So that's the end of the Soviet player. Now we remove all the activation point markers from the Soviet activation point record track. So now we go to the German turn. The first phase is the activation point phase. Germans receive 4 activation points. Place all 4 in the unused German activation point marker box. Now we go to the German movement phase. Germans need to plug the huge gap between Kaluga and Sukinichi. And to do so they may need the help of the 2nd Panzer Armee. The panzer divisions, they have high movement rates, but there's a lot of wooded terrain between where they are and where they need to go. So 1 activation point is used to activate the units of the 4th Army for movement. Let's take a look at the units from the 4th Army. These are their positions before movement. We see the positions after movement. One unit has been left behind here to slow down the Soviets, but the other units have fallen back here. One unit to occupy Medin, and other units falling back to Yukhnov. The Germans spend another activation point to activate the 2nd Panzer Armee for movement. So let's check out the movement of the units of the 2nd Panzer Armee in this sector. See, the 2 panzer divisions could not advance a considerable distance. Let's check the movements of the units further to the south. So we see this panzer division moving in this direction here. And this panzer division, using road movement, makes it all the way next to Bryansk. 2 of the 3 Panzer Grenadier divisions here almost make it here to Bryansk, while the remaining Panzer Grenadier division holds the town here of Minsk. The Germans use their 3rd activation point to activate the units of the R formation for movement. The R formation units are the ones with the purple colored band, and we see that the Russians have broken through to the west of Ostashkov. These are the positions of the units after movement. They've fallen back a little, and the gap is now sealed. Germans only have 1 activation point left, so which formation should be activated? The 9th Army? There's no gaps there. Units still seem to hold a firm line. The units of the 4th Panzer Armee, however, have suffered some disruptions and face the powerful 1st Shock Army. So they will be activated. So the 4th and last activation point is for the 4th Panzer Army for movement. And disrupted units cannot move, so those disrupted units will be staying in place for now. Here are the positions of the units from the 4th Panzer Army after movement. They are falling back, and you see panzer units forming a second line because they will surely be called to help out in this or other sectors pretty soon. So we finished the German movement phase, onto the combat phase, but there's no more activation points. So we proceed now to the recovery phase, and now we flip all disrupted units to their front sides. We see 3 Panzer Grenadier units near Mosaisk are now undisrupted. 3 infantry divisions from the same formation are flipped back to their undisrupted side. Correction to make here, this unit had been retreated. We forgot to flip it to its disrupted side, so we do so, and it could not move during the German movement phase, so now it is in that position after the retreat, and now we flip that unit to its undisrupted side. That's the end of the German recovery phase, and that's the end of the German turn and turn 1. So I'll see you in turn 2. This is Stuka Joe signing off for now. Thanks for watching.